Hello, dear listeners. Sometimes you're going along in life and, you're reading your books and I'm taping the podcast and I say to myself, why does it just have to be people that write books? Can't it be people inspired by books? And so I went on this podcast that's hosted by this great talent, Scott Carter. It's called Ye Gods, where I got to talk about spiritual things, religion, what shaped me in that regard. And I said to Scott, will you come on my podcast? So, what you're about to hear is that conversation. So, Scott is here today to tell us all about it, why he went on this journey and this search. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Scott Carter. All your life, you yearned and pursued this idea of a spiritual connection here on earth, that somehow art plays into this in a major way. The idea that art is the voice of the soul. So let's start with that.
First of all, I think about who might be the listener. I think this is a time when many people are in a state of confusion, when many people are in a state of despair. I think that a lot of people had, perhaps when they were growing up, religious experiences that were not good for them. That whatever religion, I think some people had alienating experiences, some had traumatic experiences. But I think that for people, I have a 30-year-old daughter and a 25-year-old daughter, and I think that for people that age, there is a sense that they will not share in the same prosperity that our generation has enjoyed. And I think then for people our age and older, mortality is staring you right in the face, and you need to be confronting issues that perhaps in the middle of your life, when you were thinking about more about your career or acquisitions or whatever, that you weren't spending your time thinking about the big questions of life. So what my goal is on Ye Gods is to be presenting people from all different backgrounds, because we have atheists, we've had several different kinds of Catholics, including you're Catholic, but I've also had Larry Wilmore, who considers himself a Cathnostic because his parents divorced. One was agnostic, one was Catholic, and he would spend 6 months with one, then 6 months with the other. So he went back and forth. Julia Sweeney, who is a neighbor, and she grew up Catholic, loved her Catholic upbringing, communicates. She texts with priests at the Vatican, and yet she does not believe in God, Jesus, or the Bible. So she calls herself a cultural Catholic. Patricia Heaton calls herself a cradle Catholic. So many different. Then I've had religions that people might not be aware of. Rainn Wilson is a Baha'i. Valerie Kaur is a Sikh. I've had rabbis. I've had Jesuit priests. I've had all sorts of people, and I just ask them to explain the events that early in their life that formed their conclusions about the world, and now those conclusions shape the choices that they make and determine their lives.
Now, Scott, as you've gone on in life, when you're sitting at a big table or you enter a restaurant or something, you don't see a bunch of people sitting there. You see their souls.
I think that every interaction we have in our life is sacred. And I think that, and I often remember there's an observation that David O. Selznick, the great MGM, the producer of Gone with the Wind and many other movies, Rebecca and Wuthering Heights and many other movies, or Sam Goldwyn was Wuthering Heights. But he said if he had $1 million movie, and for 1 second, the camera panned over an extra. For that second, the extra was the star of the movie. I think that's how we should think about all the interactions we have on a daily basis. When you go into a store and you deal with the clerk for 1 minute, let's say, that's a sacred interaction. And at that moment, that clerk or that waitress, they are the star of the movie of your life. And so many people, I mean, we are in an industry where we often get accolades and applause, or were very well paid, or were recognized as celebrities. Most people don't have a job like that. And for most people, a kind word during the day said to them, or a warm interaction, is going to be something that when they go home at night, they're going to remember that as a highlight of their day.
Wow. And that happens to be a philosophy that's kind of your religion.
Yeah.
To be kind, the be kind religion, to do treat others as you hope to be treated. And of course it goes even deeper than that, because when you're kind to others, you kind of are shoring up your soul to face the next battle.
Yes, I think that's true. And what one of the things I've learned in the last few years is this sense that the act of kindness that goes out, I disassociate myself now with what comes back. That sometimes it's a message in a bottle. So you're on a desert island, you're writing a note, save our ship, SOS, put it in the bottle, throw the bottle out. And as soon as you throw the bottle out into the ocean, forget about it. Find the next bottle, write the next note, do the next thing. So you keep having these things go out. And then what happens very often for me is when something nice comes back, I'd forgotten about writing the note and sending it off. Here's a very specific example of what I'm talking about. This new play that I've got called I Will, which is going to start being done in September, and then it's going to be done in a few different theaters around the country. But there was a workshop at Baylor University. They had a festival of new works, and there were four plays chosen. And so my play is about Shakespeare in the year 1608, and there's this wonderful actor who I've worked with a few times now in the Dallas area. He's in the drama department at Baylor, but his name is John Michael Mars. So when the day of the reading of my play, I wrote a note to everybody in the cast. And I tried to make all the notes personal. I tried to make it specifically acknowledging what's special in them and thanking them. Okay, the reading went well. There was a standing ovation. People were cheering. All that went well. And then I go back to LA, go back home. A few months later, we get news that there is actually going to be a production of the play at a theater in Fort Worth, Texas called Stage West. And the artistic director from Stage West had been at that reading. And so I called John Michael. First, I called the director, who I've been working with since 2016, and then called John Michael to tell him that, we both want him to play Shakespeare. Okay. He texts me a screenshot from his office that he took that note that I wrote to him. He framed it. And so every day at his desk, he looks at it, and I'll tell you what the note said. Because when I was there, I got to meet his son. His wife is pregnant. She's wonderful. She's an actress and also a teacher. And I just was also, I've known him for a few years, but I was watching how the kids at Baylor and all the other faculty revered this guy because he's a wonderful man. And very talented and exceedingly generous with the students and with his colleagues. So what I wrote was, to John Michael Mars, you don't have to be Frank Capra to recognize that you, like George Bailey, are the richest man in town. Thank you for everything. Hope we work again, Scott. So I had no idea, but this meant so much to him. He framed it. So a message in the bottle goes out. You don't know if the bottle's going to crack on a rock and nothing will ever happen. You don't know if someone's going to read it and throw it away. But it might be the ocean liner that comes back to pick you up and rescue you from where you are.
That is so beautiful. I think just encouraging kindness in the ways that are direct to someone. if you're walking down the street and you see a lady and she just is magnificently put together, and you stop and say, "You look very beautiful today," it's a game changer, at least for the next half hour, or maybe the
May
whole
I
day.
may I also say that one of the compensatory joys of aging is that when I compliment, particularly a young woman, they no longer think of it as a creepy guy coming on to them. They think older gentlemen acknowledging that they are a blessing to the landscape in which they are living.
It's fantastic, and it frees you. So my mother used to say this to me: live in the era of your life you're in. Don't anticipate, don't look back, stay in it and enjoy it. You feel good, you're doing good things, you're working, whatever it is. Maybe you're not, maybe you've been injured, or maybe something happened and you got sick. Stay in that to heal, to get out of it. And it's really helped me, because I don't look at things like a longing of what am I not getting, but I look at it as what's happening around me. And I think
Yeah,
that's the waft and weave really of what you get at with your guests, is you really plumb the depths of what's your purpose and what does that
yeah,
mean in
because
terms of what
what
you
I want to
believe.
do is I want to have each of these people. I want to know how they make sense of life, because by them explaining that, I think listeners get some life hacks to consider and maybe try, and maybe it helps people in their daily life from then on.
I love that you are celebrating the 250th anniversary of our country with a special series of guests. Now, listen to some of these folks, my dear listeners: David Frum, Jonathan Alter, Bradley Whitford, David Dark, Nayera Hack, Robert Costa. Oh my gosh, these are all people that I think the world of, and I also think have got something to say about this country. We're taping this on the day that the Supreme Court has defended birthright citizenship. And that happened this morning. And it's beautiful. And I'm so excited, and I'm sure you are too. Can you tell me why you decided to do this special series, this arc in the Ye Gods podcast? What was it about it that compelled you? And I think it might have something to do with where you were for the bicentennial in 1976.
Yes, the
Okay.
the, there is a need for people, and it's why people develop with religions develop rituals. There is a need to keep reminding yourself of origins, particularly when they are as noble as the origin of this country 250 years ago. And sometimes we take all of our freedoms for granted, and sometimes we need to go back in time and to remind ourselves of just how special the origin of this country is. I remember on Ken Burns' documentary of Thomas Jefferson, George Will said, every other country, it starts because the people live there. And it goes back into the mists of time, and no one knows the beginning. Our country begins with a few words written by Thomas Jefferson, and if you're born here and you agree to those words, you are a citizen. You should be treated equally to every other citizen. But we need to keep going back, and reminding ourselves of that sacredness. And one of the notions of it is it was conceived as a work in progress. It was conceived that over a period of time we would be able to put in amendments. One of Jefferson's notions was that every generation should be redefining the Constitution for itself to make sure it's It's something living, and it's working for you at that moment. And um, and it also, by going back, it also informs you as to when you're off the track. It informs you as to when you've derailed from the original intentions that helped found this country.
And the country as we know it today, now has become a country where we really cling to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We study them. We have a Supreme Court that defends those laws and rights as they were first established. And what I love about the variety of people you're talking to is there's a timelessness to this, isn't there, Scott? There's a timelessness. We realize now you don't have to rewrite them every 5 years, but you have the option of adding the amendments. That's really kind of a unique way to look at government.
It is a unique way to look at government, and not every country, even countries that we think of as being civilized, don't have the same guarantees of freedoms that we do. It's interesting, after the Constitution was finished, it wasn't immediately ratified because several of the founders had the notion of, wait a minute, we can't stop here. We've got to have a Bill of Rights. We've just gone through what we consider to be a tyrannical king imposing levies on us that we did not agree to. And we need to specify that we will not tolerate future generations having their rights abridged in the way that we feel our rights were abridged by this king. And so there was the necessity to have what we now refer to as the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And also by issuing that, by providing those amendments, we also gave a path to future amendments being written. And so, I mean, you think about the origin of the country, and there was an entire class of citizen that was labeled as a fraction of a complete human being. And over a period of time, we tried to remedy that. We've tried to that the country has officially become more inclusive, and it's never a perfect union, but the notion of striving is to make it more perfect, get it closer to being perfect.
It's interesting, Scott, that you bring that up, because for people of color in this country, this celebration is a fraught one, because not only is it did they have to basically fight to be free, they had to fight for the vote. When there's mass firings in the federal government, it's the women of color that are canned. We could keep going. And yet I always say this to my brothers and sisters of color. Without you, this isn't much of a country.
Oh, that's completely right. That's completely
true. Your vision
Yes.
and your storytelling. I'm constantly reminded, not only in the arts, in science, particularly in education, the gifts, the brilliance, and to think, I know where my people started, and you know where your people started, but to have begun the journey of being an American in chains, you're really hitting something there.
Everything you've said is true, but also white women. One of the guests on Ye Gods is this wonderful writer, Claire Hoffman, who did a biography of Aimee Semple McPherson, who was a preacher in Los Angeles, and she was just this amazing global celebrity. But at the time that she built the Angelus Temple, which still stands in Echo Park in Los Angeles, women could not own property. Women in California could not own property. And that's 1921. So it's barely 100 years ago.
1973, you couldn't get a mortgage or a credit card without your father's signature, your husband's signature, or your brother's, or some man. It could be any man was worth more than you were.
Yeah. And I know
but Scott, I think you have a particular sensitivity because you're married to BB and you have daughters, you're surrounded by women. And I think that probably has encouraged your, what would I call it, your illuminata regarding the role of women in a culture.
I also think that getting married was a step to me becoming a better human being because before I got married, any woman I met, well, this might be the future Mrs. Carter. As soon as I got married, I became a better friend and a better colleague to every woman I met.
Well, you're the rare man that really wanted to get married. Most men have
well,
to be
my
dragged
wife will
into
tell
the
you she was on the
institution.
page before I was, and one thing I did was I'm a big believer in before you go to sleep, give yourself a question, and then when you get up, see what that answer is in the morning. And so my notion was because most men you do not want anything to restrict your freedom, and so what I would do is so I said okay. I'm going to propose to her after 3 mornings in a row when I wake up and it's yes, you've got to propose. So I did, I would do 1, 2, then maybe one day I would wake up, no, but then finally it got to 3. Well, then I thought, let me see if I can get to 4. I got to 10, and after 10, that's when I proposed.
That's beautiful. So that was a subconscious soul decision that came from the deepest part of you. I think that's fantastic. And you've just thrilled so many women listeners who are so excited that you took your time and care to be a good husband and a good father, right?
I hope so. I don't think you can. I think anytime you embark on a relationship with anyone else, there are going to be ways in which you disappoint them or they may disappoint you.
Sure.
But part of the sacredness of the commitment is that you accept whatever you see to be a discrepancy or a disappointment as being part of what you've bargained for. It's and you're getting more from the relationship than if you did not make this commitment. And I'm aware of a lot of young men who often I will talk to who are involved in a relationship, but it hasn't gotten to marriage yet. And I know that you can never completely give advice to people, and there's no reason why anybody should take your advice. But one thing I will talk about is from the standpoint of now being married 38 years, I have this sense of whatever we went through, I'm happy about it. It's almost like, and the Odyssey is about to hit movie theaters, but it's almost like the scene in the Odyssey where Odysseus knows he's going to be passing by the island of the Sirens, and so he lashes himself to the mast of the ship and has all the other crew get their ears plugged so he can hear, but he's not going to be able to jump off the ship and head to the island. He knows that, well, anyway, at some point his ship has passed the island.
Sure.
And the song of the sirens has dimmed, and now it's silent again, and there is serenity. Well, that's a little bit like what a long marriage can be like, is that you're getting past the time of temptations or misgivings or hardships that you did not know that you were going to be experiencing, and the seas are calm.
Oh, now, tell us, how did you build this life? How did you build a life where you're pretty much working 7 days a week, no matter how you want to call it? If you're not working on a play, you're putting a show together, you do something. How did you build it?
When I first moved to New York in 1976, I had a lot of friends who were actors, and they would spend a lot of their time checking their phone messages to see if they got callbacks or if they got some new audition. And they were people who
now explain to folks, Scott, I want you to explain to folks, because they're going to love this, about bells are ringing or those answering services, because there were no phones. You had a phone at your apartment, right? or you had a code that you could check in. You'd call and you'd go, "Hey, Sarah, is there anything for me? I'm number 11 or whatever." Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, this was a time in between, before cell phones, before even message machines that would tape a message, and so you would come back to your apartment and hit the machine, and you'd have 5 messages, and you'd listen to all 5. But in days before that, particularly actors in New York would have a message service, and you would call up the message service, find out if there were any messages for you, and you would be hoping that they loved you at the audition this morning, and they want you to come back tomorrow afternoon. And very often, my friends who are actors, once or twice a year, maybe more if they were lucky, would get a part in a movie. Maybe they'd get a commercial. And the commercial was going to pay for the next year of rent. It was going to pay for groceries and whatever. But there was a sense of I kept going to, what's the daily life? And one of the reasons that I went into stand-up was I was willing to go for a more modest day in which maybe I was going to perform at a couple of clubs in New York and get cab fare, and maybe that was going to be $40 that day or whatever. It wasn't going to be several thousand that was going to get me through the next 6 months of rent. It was going to be just enough to get by. But I was going to be busy. So I remember one night I did as many as 6 different shows at clubs in New York. And I was also developing a community, which whenever any young person asks me for advice, and there are a lot of ways in which I am the worst person to ask for advice now, because so much of the world that I was a part of when I was struggling no longer exists. But one of the things that does still exist, clubs still exist, and one of the great things about being a comic in those days was that you were forming this community of like-minded people. And also when people began to get television shows, because there was this era where a lot of comics would be hired to do a TV show based upon the comedy persona that they had on stage. So with Tim Allen, it's Home Improvement, and
Roseanne.
This is what he did. Roseanne, right?
Ray Romano,
Jerry Seinfeld, all these different people.
Brett
Butler, all these people were friends, and so when you began to get breaks and you were able to give employment to other people, it was really nice to have a group you already trusted, because as soon as you get a little bit of power, you're going to start meeting people who just see the power. They weren't with you when the power wasn't there. And so you want to be, and that's one of the things, this goes back to what we were just talking about. My goal when I was a comic was to be as kind and helpful and encouraging to everybody that I could be. I remember just a few years ago, there was a party that Kevin Nealon gave for himself because he was turning a milestone number. And I was talking to somebody and I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and it's Adam Sandler. And Adam Sandler, who I hadn't seen in decades, said to me, "I have never thanked you. But the first time I performed in New York City, it was at the comic strip. You were the MC. You introduced me. I came up on stage. I thought I did terrible. And then I went to the bar. And after you'd introduced the next act, you came out to the bar to tell me you are funny, you have a unique point of view, and you just have to keep going. And you don't know how much that sustained me for the next 6 months of my struggles."
See, it's like you're actually, Scott Carter, a farmer. You planted seeds all along the way. I used to say this and still do to my daughter, that your friends are a bouquet. They're a bouquet that you're gathering through your whole life. And by the end, just your world is just flowers. It's just, you're engulfed in them. And that's how you live your life. I mean, if I call around about you, because when I came on to do you guys, we have our our wonderful mutual friend Michael Patrick King, and of course, you can't beat him for a friend. And when I met you, though, when I talk to people about you, there's so much love for you in the community, in the what we call show business. But I also know your passions are just as deep and important to you. The plays, the idea of sharing Shakespeare with the world, the idea of gathering in community in the theater. I'm beginning to understand that it's all part of the same thing with you.
It all goes back to one thing. A lot of it goes back to one thing, or two things. The first thing is from the age of 2 on, I'm a severe asthmatic. So I'm born in Kansas City, Missouri. My parents think I'm going to die. They moved the whole family to Tucson, Arizona. I survive, but have a sense of guilt about how much I have dispossessed my family. I also have a sense from a very early on time in my childhood. My mother was very religious, but it wasn't dogmatic. Whenever we would move, we would find the church where people were nice, and in a way, the coffee and donuts served at the fellowship, those were her communion wafer and wine. Those were her sacraments. But she would take me to all sorts of services. I went to laying on of hands services where I'd be in an empty church, and I'm 7 or 8 years old, and I'm with these old people who are in wheelchairs or they've got crutches, and the minister would come down the aisle laying his hands on me and invoking God to heal me, and the healing did not occur. And so over a period of time, there was a sense of, well, look, maybe there's no God, or maybe there is a God, but the God's now dead, or maybe I am not worthy of his grace, or I have not done something enough to be warranting the healing that I've been seeking. Okay, so that's the first notion. Second notion, June 1987, I'm living in New York. I'm a struggling stand-up comic. BB and I have just started dating. And I wake up one morning and I can't breathe. And eventually she calls 911. Paramedics come. They take me out of her apartment. I am put into the back of an ambulance. We speed down First Avenue. We crash into the First Avenue street fair, and people are looking up at the ambulance from the holiday that they are enjoying, and they're seeing this odd note of desperation, and I'm watching them all. We get to Bellevue, and I am instantly taken out of the hospital and taken into the emergency room. And they hooked me up to all sorts of different things. And a doctor, one of the doctors, comes right behind me and whispers in my ear, "You're not going to die." And I had a sense of, okay, slowly I'm going to come back. And I was not a stranger in those days to emergency rooms. And I would go in, I would get a shot of adrenaline or whatever it is. I'd be on albuterol for an hour or so. Then my breathing would return to normal and I'd be excused. Well, fortunately for me, the head of the chest lungs department at Bellevue Hospital, Dr. Frank Adams, was on call that day. And when I was feeling better, he came by and he said, "Look, you've been like a car trying to do a cross-country journey in first gear. And you've just been straight. You've been using the emergency room like it's your de facto lifeline. We're not going to excuse you today. We're going to keep you here for a week, and we're going to raise your basic level of health back to a higher level than you've known, and then every 3 months you're going to come back and see me, and I'm going to monitor you. And when a pollen season is coming up, I may put you on steroids for a week or so to get through the pollen season, but you're never going to get back down to the level of desperation where you've been for months and months." So I was checked into Bellevue. I was there for 6 days. And when I got out, it was a Saturday afternoon, and at the corner of 26th Street and First Avenue, I had an epiphany. experience. It was like Saul on the road to Damascus. I'd been one of cynical, skeptical comics. I thought anybody who believed in religion was somehow less intelligent than I was. They were an eye roll to me. I remember at the time there were a lot of waitresses at the clubs where I worked who were born again Christians. There were a lot of people who were into a particularly faddish sect of chanting Buddhism at the time. And I remember thinking they were all of inferior intelligence to me. Now I knew there's got to be a God. But I felt like, and when I looked around, I remember a man selling Sabrett hot dogs. And my just thinking of what an incredible universe to have thought to include this delicacy. Somebody else was walking down the street with a boombox, and I thought, how wonderful! They are bringing music to the populace. Just watching everybody, and everything seemed rarefied, like in an old documentary, where the clothes are different and the music's different, and buildings are still standing that have since been torn down. And everything seemed rarefied, and I entered this bliss state, which lasted for a week or so. And then it began to fade, and it was like the short story Flowers for Algernon, where a man of limited intelligence is given a serum by which he temporarily becomes a genius, but then it's going to fade and he's going to die. And as this bliss state began to fade with me, I thought, what are ways in which I can make sure I keep connected to what has been the most alive that I've ever really been in my life. I don't want this 20 years from now for me to look back upon this time and it's like a blip and there's no continuum. And so I made a few resolutions. One of the resolutions was if anybody wanted to talk to me about religion, I would have to listen. If anybody wanted me to go to any kind of a ceremony, I would have to go. If anybody wanted to have me read something, any kind of literature, I would have to read it. And so I was this open-minded, open-hearted person. I would have to listen until I had a sense. Then I could either accept in my heart or not accept in my heart and then move on. So if I was walking down Broadway and there was somebody with a Mr. Microphone haranguing the crowd, I couldn't just keep walking. I had to stop. Or I'm on the subway and I'm getting a pamphlet for the end of the world is coming on October 24th. Well, I would keep it until October 25th, and now I could throw it away. And anyway, through this time, so for instance, I had a Jehovah's Witness who came to my apartment every Wednesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. And his name was Kim Lawrence. And I was the first, when he became a witness, I was the first apartment building he knocked on. So the fact that I let him in and let him talk for an hour, he thought I must be really good at this proselytizing. I must be very talented at this. Anyway, he would finish, and then at the end I would say, Kim, once again, I believe that you believe everything you're telling me. I can't find it in my heart to share it, and I'll see you again next week. And so that went on for over a year, and then I began to work in TV and wasn't around at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at my apartment. I was in offices. But over a period of time, and somebody introduced to me the idea of we're here to be building a spiritual soul. What you're doing is you're opening your heart, you're opening your mind. And when things come to you that seem true, that becomes like a pixel on a screen image. And you're looking to add pixels so that you get a composite portrait. And just all sorts of things happened in my life. My health was better than it had ever been. Eventually, I proposed to Bibi. We got married. I started working in TV. And just my whole life became something different. But I tried to always be true to the day that I walked out of the hospital and had this sense of gratitude. And there have been times in my life where I've gotten sick a couple of times, never anything like the event in 1987. But there've been times where I've taken things for granted. There are times where I've lost my temper to people. Um, I've never doubted the existence of God since June 1987, only whether or not I'm being true to keeping the channel of communication open.
And you do believe, Scott, now you're going to have to tell me if you believe it, but you do believe that the life you live, you carry it into the next world somehow.
Yeah, well, okay, so here's where I am on the next world. There is a quote from Thomas Jefferson that I love, and I'm going to maybe get it a little bit wrong. But he said, "I've stopped speculating on the afterlife and instead rest my head on a pillow of ignorance that God has made soft for me, knowing how often I should need to use it." So what I do now is I just think about every moment living in a sense of gratitude, because that's keeping if I'm angry, then I'm static to the signal of God. When I'm in a state of gratitude, the signal's clear. And so that's what I'm trying to stay in. And that's why if I'm, let's say, this is not to say that I'm a wonderful person, but I do a food bank usually most Sunday mornings, where I have to prepare 10 lunches. Each lunch needs to have 7 items in it. And I shop for these items on Saturday afternoon. And I go to the same grocery store in Los Angeles, and I now know about 5 or 6 of the people who work there. And for instance, I have a philosophical disagreement with avocado. And when I talk to the sushi maker, he sees me. We both bow to each other, and then he says, "No avocado. Come back in 20 minutes." And so every day I get this, and it's a gift from Eddie. I meet Ruthie, who's this checkout, the woman at checkout, who is one of the greatest people on earth. In fact, the other cashiers have said to me, everybody loves Ruthie. But Ruthie knows that I need 5 paper bags, because I'm going to put 2 lunches in both, to take them up the street to deposit them for when the truck comes to take all of the lunches to the general food bank. And then 5,000 to 6,000 people who otherwise would be hungry are going to be fed that afternoon. But anyway, when I walk into that grocery store, it's kind of a spiritual, it's almost like Stations of the Cross for me. And I'm going to see Verdell, who's from New Orleans and who often is the one bagging. I'm going to see Juana, who is Ruthie's superior. Anyway, it's kind of this wonderful thing, but at every moment it's keeping me in the present. With here's a familiar face. Let me thank them for what they're doing. Let me, if I need to find something and don't know where it is, and I ask, and someone leads or walks me to it, let me thank them for that. They could have just pointed, go to aisle 3.
Yeah.
No, they're walking me to aisle 3.
So you really have got this, which is basically is the acknowledgement that you're on a journey, then who's on the journey with you, and this sense of community. You just told us the most beautiful parable from your own life about being in community, and in fact, what might be a pain in the neck for somebody else to have to go get the lunches coordinated for you is a spiritual act. That is magnificent.
Well, one day, not too many months ago, I get a text from my wife. She was driving by the grocery store where I go, and she went in and she asked, "Where's Ruthie?" And so she sent me a selfie of herself with Ruthie, and it's one of the great pictures of one of the great photos that I've got.
That's so fabulous. Well, this has been not only illuminating, but heartwarming, soul-lifting. I encourage everybody to head over to Ye Gods and listen. There's a beautiful catalog of folks you've talked to, each one very different, dear listeners. You will love it. A lot of times books are talked about, a lot of time reading, where people are at. But I think what I came away with today, dear Scott, is the idea that the man in search of healing has become the healer. And I can't thank you enough for being here.
Adri, it's always a delight to see you. I'm so glad we know each other.
Yes.
And this has been a delight.